Welcome back. You are tuning in to Traders Nation. My pleasure to have with us here today book author Chunka Moy. He authored Billion-Dollar Lessons, What You Can Learn from the Most Inexcusable Business Failures of the Last 25 Years. Chunka, welcome to Traders Nation. How are you today?
I'm great. Thanks, Kurt, for having me on.
Good, good. Now listen, you examined more than 750 inexcusable corporate collapses. Which failure, in your opinion, was the most? What was the most common mistake that they made?
Well, the short answer is bad strategy.
Yeah.
Of the 750 failures we looked at, a good 46% of them was lost to mistakes on the drawing board, as opposed to execution or luck, as conventional wisdom would have it.
All right. Poor planning. I mean, you can have a lot of great things going on, but what is that one thing that just really tripped everything up? It cost these companies, if anything, hundreds of millions of dollars. Yeah,
well, if you take underneath the covers, there's some main issues that come into play that lead to bad strategy. One is companies tend to overestimate the power that comes with size. So they'll buy a company thinking, they start off with, let's say, buying 0.5% of the world's supply of steel. They buy somebody else, they double in size, and they wind up buying 1% of the world's steel. Well, in actuality, that's nothing, right? The rest of the market is concerned. So often companies overestimate the power that comes with size.
Yeah.
The other thing that they often do is that they underestimate the complexity that comes with size. So just because you buy someone else or you have a strategy that grows to say twice your size, doesn't mean you're doing the same thing twice as often. You're doing new things, so there's more complexity. A third problem that comes into play is companies always overestimate their hold on customers. There's a story we tell in the book about a number of Florida utilities back in the 80s that thought, hey, we have all these nice elderly customers that are part of our base. Wouldn't it be great if we bought an insurance company and sold them insurance because they trust us?
Right.
Well, in actuality, their electricity customers had no interest in doing insurance business with them. Sure. They lost a fortune.
Yeah, and a fit to me, if you ask me. I mean, that just because you have that base, I mean, the elderly, they have a lot of buying power in a lot of different areas. Doesn't mean I'm going to go out and I'm going to, pick me up a Cadillac dealership. Doesn't mean I'm going to go out and, do you see what I'm saying, where I'm getting at? It just doesn't fit. It doesn't fit in the business model. And most importantly, maybe their expertise. All right, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, oftentimes companies get into businesses that they really know nothing about.
Yeah.
We can unfortunately see it in the happenings today. I mean, if you look at Bank of America's purchase of Merrill Lynch.
Yeah.
Well, Bank of America has a great track record of buying up banks.
Yeah.
They understand banks. They know how to integrate them in. They know how to collapse the management structures, the systems. What does Bank of America know about Merrill Lynch's business?
Right.
Right. It's a completely different thing. It may be the sort of that, one acquisition too far.
Right. You took my number 4 question right out of the door. All right. So how can a corporation avoid these kind of disastrous mistakes then?
Well, there's a great story about Alfred P. Sloan, who was the CEO of General Motors back in the 20s and 30s. Really built that corporation out of many disparate parts. He's sitting at a meeting with his executive team.
Yeah.
And he looks around him and says, "Gentlemen, are we all agreed on this decision?"
Yeah.
They all nod their heads. And Sloan says, "Well, then I suggest we adjourn this meeting and come back together when we really understand what we should disagree about." Because, in essence, we believe that what really drives out the details of a complex situation is contention within an organization. You have to be able to argue about the finer points, and you have to really understand a problem from multiple sides.
Yeah.
So oftentimes, the knowledge, the expertise, the conflicting views are inside the organization, but the management processes and the corporate cultures don't allow for those to bubble up.
Yeah. Now, on the flip side of these huge mistakes that are made, there's a positive. What enormous value is there in learning from companies that has lost millions?
Well, if you look at the whole bookshelves full of business books, the problem tends to be that they all focus on success.
Right.
They say, look at these guys, if you just do what they do, you'll be able to find the same success. As business researchers and authors, one mistake we tragically make is we don't focus on the companies that try to do the same things and fail.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like walking into a casino and looking at a guy at a roulette table who bets all his money on red and wins, and assuming, well, all I have to do is bet on red.
Right.
You have to talk to the guys who did the same thing and lost. And that's really the lessons we believe that you can learn. You can look at companies that try to do the same strategies you're embarking on and ask yourself, well, how is what we're doing different?
Right.
What can we learn from where they failed in addition to learning from those who succeeded as well?
All right. Is it possible to fix a core business that appears or seems to be unfixable? Chunka.
Yes.
Is it possible to fix a core business instead of going out and acquiring and trying to fit somebody that doesn't fit in your model? Is it possible to fix a core business that appears to be unfixable?
Well, sometimes it is, and unfortunately sometimes it's not.
Yeah.
And one of the things that organizations tend to do is they tend not to look at all of their options. And sometimes you're just dealt with a bad hand. The best thing to do is to fold.
Yeah.
So if we look, for example, at Kodak, right? Kodak for almost a century owned the film business, the
right.
film processing business. They got they almost a worldwide monopoly. They had 60% plus margins on that business.
Yeah.
And then the advent of digital really killed them.
Right.
Now, you have to ask, was there anything they could do? Well, we think there could have been because, as early as the 80s, Kodak knew that problem was coming, and they foresaw sort of where the tipping point would be in which the digital would come against them.
Sure.
The problem was that, compared against 60% margins on the film side, digital was at best 15 to 20%. So for almost a decade, they did nothing.
Yeah. And they paid for that, though.
They paid for it. They had a long time to prepare, and they did nothing because they were too wedded to their old business. Now, if you look at their key competitors, one sold,
all right,
and the other got into digital early and sort of took the hits early in order to get that business. Both those options were open to Kodak, but they just wouldn't explore those options.
Yeah, did the Kodak try to make it up in other areas, for instance, consumables, the papers, because let's face it, you can still take pictures with the digital, but it has to be processed. The people still put them in the, in the picture form, in the paper form, and put them in their books.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. That's the other avenue they could have explored. And if you look at HP, so much of their business comes from ink and printers.
Sure.
And that scenario where Kodak holds a lot of patents, a lot of technology.
Yeah.
But they just didn't get into it and take advantage of the lead that they had.
All right. Circling back to my Bank of America, here we are. Is buying more problems and efficiencies? Isn't that a problem? For instance, Bank of America is out scooping up some of these financials and some of these troubled lenders. Is that really a smart thing for them to do?
Well, I think it's very questionable. I think the key issue is, do they really understand that business? Do they understand the problems that they're buying?
Yeah.
And are they better able to deal with those problems than the management they're taking over?
Right.
So, in the Merrill Lynch case, clearly it's a business that they don't have that much experience with.
Yeah.
The management that knows it the best has proven itself to have not been able to handle it. So they're buying a business where they're not really interested in the business that's going south. They're interested in that whole network of brokers.
Sure.
Right. But they bought the problem with it as well.
All right. Yeah, I think you're right. And let's face it, too, the infrastructure's already in place. Does Bank of America, do they really have to be expertise in that area since they're buying that expertise? That's part of the package.
Well, they're buying suspect expertise.
Right. Because they are in trouble, right?
They are in trouble.
Expertise got them in trouble, right?
Yeah. Well, here's an example of where history could have taught them a lesson.
All right.
There was in the late 90s a company called Conseco Financial, right, which in early 2000s what became the third largest bankruptcy in U.S. history up to that point.
Yeah.
The reason they went bankrupt was because they swooped in and bought an early example of a subprime fiasco. They bought Greentree Financial, who made a ton of money selling 30-year mortgages on 10-year life trailer homes.
Yeah.
Made a bunch of money on loan origination and fees and securitization. Sure. But of course, ultimately, the real quality of those loans came into play. The rest of the market abandoned Greentree. They couldn't refinance their short-term debt.
Yeah.
Conseco, thinking that it had all this acquisition expertise, because it was really built up of large number of acquisitions of insurance companies, swooped in, paid $6 billion for Greentree, thought they had a handle on the situation, and in a short amount of time wrote off billions, went into bankruptcy, all because of this overreach.
Bad decision, in my opinion.
Yeah,
that's one good example, Chunka, without a doubt. Where can we find the book at today? $1 Billion Lessons.
$1 Billion Lessons. You can find it on Amazon and almost any bookstore.
Beautiful. Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, wherever you can find books, you can get a copy of $1 Billion Lessons. My pleasure to have with us here today, Chunka and Moy. Thanks for being with us here today. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
You're more than welcome. Head out today, get a copy. What you can learn from the most inexcusable business failures of the last 25 years.